Korean Peninsula tensions are escalating, and ASEAN countries are tilting toward China. Against this backdrop, US Secretary of State Rex Tillerson met with ASEAN foreign ministers. What picture of America's Asia-Pacific policy will emerge from this meeting? Has ASEAN been trying to rely on China for economic issues and the US for security? Is it necessary to keep a balance between the two countries? What difficulties will ASEAN have while doing so? The South China Sea issue was highly expected to be raised in the US-ASEAN foreign ministers meeting.
The South China Sea issue is not a problem between China and ASEAN, or between China and the United States, let alone between the United States and ASEAN.
Will the meeting bring new challenges to the relatively stable South China Sea situation? Philippine President Duterte and Myanmar State Councillor Aung San Suu Kyi are expected to attend China's upcoming Belt and Road Forum. What can we expect from the forum, and what could be the implications?
The annual US-ASEAN Foreign Ministers meeting took place on Thursday in Washington, D.C. against the background of the Korean Peninsula tensions escalating and ASEAN tilting toward China. What policies the US are likely to adopt in the Asia-Pacific region is not only of concern to ASEAN countries, but to people all over the world. To discuss the many issues related to this US-ASEAN Foreign Ministers meeting, I'm happy to be joined in the studio by Mr. Tao Wenzhao, Research Fellow at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, Mr. Liu Qing at the China Institute of International Studies, and Mr. Einar Tangen, our current affairs commentator. We will also be joined from Manila via satellite by Mr. Richard J. Haidarian, international current affairs expert. That's our topic. This is Dialogue. I'm Pan Deng. So, gentlemen, let's start with the outcome of this US-ASEAN Foreign Ministers meeting. Mr. Tao, do you think there's anything concrete this time?
Oh, I can hardly see anything concrete result. Actually, Donald Trump said, his Asia policy is result-oriented, but I do not see any, no result. And actually, Tillerson assembled all the foreign ministers of ASEAN countries because there's a difference between President Obama and President Trump in their foreign policy. President Obama paid more attention to Asia Pacific and advocated the so-called rebalance strategy, while President Trump stopped using rebalance and he paid more attention to Middle East. First to crush the IS and then to regain the initiative from Syria. And then in Asia Pacific, he paid more attention to Korean Peninsula than the ASEAN countries. So ASEAN countries actually are very dissatisfied with President Trump's policy.
Right, so Mr. Liu, do you think it's fair to say that we still haven't seen a very clear picture of the US Asia-Pacific diplomacy yet?
Well, right now we cannot see very clearly what is Donald Trump administration's Asia-Pacific policy. We just see some issues. Donald Trump raised some issues, for example, DPRK issues, and also the trade issues. And we cannot see the whole picture of the U.S. Asia-Pacific policy.
Does that surprise you, Einar? Because Trump has been emphasizing that his priority is to put America first, buy American, high American, America first all the time. Do you think he will actually put much focus on the Asia-Pacific region to the Southeast Asian nations?
Well, I think you see a very consistent pattern that's going on, and that is this idea of using security issues and then combining them with trade issues. I mean, he has said, quite frankly, I want South Korea to pay for that. I want this, I want that. He's asking continually for more payments. But on the other hand, he's not willing to say what he's willing to do. He withdrew from TPP. He made it very clear that it's all about America first. So there are real questions around it. And when Pence came, there was a really interesting dynamic. He shows up supposedly to deal with one of the most serious issues that you can have, a nuclear power, And yet he managed in all 4 countries to say, hey, listen, I know there's a problem. You need a protection. We're there, but we need a better trade deal. This struck me as highly odd. This is like something you would expect out of a gangster film. Oh, listen, you don't want your house burned down? Listen, I'll protect you. Just give me some money. Very, very odd.
So, do you think actually people would not like, people in Southeast Asia would not like that kind of approach?
Absolutely. If, in a recent poll, mostly of intellectuals, and polls go up and down, 70% believe that ASEAN does not trust the U.S., that it's gone in the wrong direction. 54% believe it's unreliable. 64% believe that it will not protect ASEAN in any way, shape, or form. So there's a real crisis of confidence. But you start contrasting a lot of things. Here you have Xi Jinping saying, we want a trade that's like the cloud, the future, right? And what do you have Trump saying? Oh, I want it to be like a bicycle wheel, with us at the center and each spoke representing a bilateral investment treaty with every nation. All right, it's this. I want Xi is saying predictability. All right, let's have a plan. Let's invest. What is U.S. saying? They're saying, well, you don't know what we want, and we're not going to tell you. All right, we don't have a policy. We simply have goals, and we want you to pay for it.
But Mr. Tillerson said that during this meeting. He said that the U.S. and ASEAN should enhance their economic relationship. So, do you see big potential there, Mr. Liu?
I don't think right now Donald Trump will focus on economic issues was they renegotiate treaties or trade agreements with ASEAN members. And in this meeting, I think the United States just first was ask ASEAN members to focus more on regional security issues, especially DPRK issues. I just in some American newspaper mentioned that the Tillerson asked the regional country, the regional countries to cooperate to deal with the nuclear issues. So in this meeting, I think the most important topic is the nuclear denuclearization.
Both of you gentlemen mentioned this DPRK issue. Mr. Tell us, why did the United States gather all the ASEAN countries in Southeast Asia to deal with the DPRK issue? What's the link there?
Well, this is, I think, a general consensus in the United States. At present, the most dangerous place is the Korean Peninsula, and the most dangerous threat is DPRK's nuclear development and missile launch. Last October, I was in Washington, D.C., and I met with more than a dozen of scholars from various think tanks. I think this is a general consensus. But Donald Trump and also Tillerson said, the strategic patience is over. The past U.S. policy towards DPRK failed. Now we should have a different policy. And today they said that every choice, every opportunity is on the table. Tomorrow they said, oh, we want to have a peaceful solution of the DPRK issue. And the next day, Trump would say, I want to talk to Kim Sim under the right circumstances. So people actually do not know what is the U.S. exact policy towards DPRK.
Right.
But one thing is clear, Donald Trump is now mobilizing the whole international society to impose the strictest sanction on DPRK. And this probably is the major purpose of Tillerson's meeting with the foreign ministers of ASEAN.
But let's take a look at the reality. 10 ASEAN members, all 10 ASEAN members have diplomatic relations with the DPRK, and 5 of them have embassies in Pyongyang. Do you think they will actually listen to the US command and put much more economic or even financial pressure on the DPRK?
Well, I mean, that's one of the questions. I mean, the real wake-up call for a lot of them was the assassination of the brother in Malaysia. This kind of shocked people. But, you know, what are they doing? There was a quote by the Philippine minister who said, quite frankly, there wasn't any direct talk about this, but it's maybe something that we should talk about. There is a realization that nobody is going to win if there's a nuclear arms race that's launched because of a nuclear-armed North Korea. That's quite clear. But, you know, how you respond to it and what's being offered, you know, it's all about Trump's agenda. But it has nothing to do, he's not offering ASEAN anything. The only thing he put on the table is we won't force anything on you economically. That's hardly a threat. I mean, it's almost unbelievable that he thinks he's going to get cooperation from this group by just simply offering nothing.
So, Mr. Liu, how do you think this will pan out in the near future? Because the situation on Korean Peninsula is still worsening.
I think Trump's DPRK's policies, puts extreme pressure on DPRK. Right now, the U.S. just tried its best to cooperate with the regional countries or also and other big powers to put great pressure on DPRK. It needs time, maybe one month or several weeks. Maybe the time will be changed, and maybe the South Korea, you know, the new president will come into power, and also, you know, the United States suspend the military exercises with ROK. I think there is a time, it's a time window for all of you know, related countries to respond. And I don't think the situation will become worse and worse, and I think there will be chance for the United States and DPRK to, you know, to talk bilaterally, even the North and the South to sit down and to talk. I think there is still their chance.
Right, since we've been talking about regional security issues, we have to mention South China Sea issue. It's cooling down in reality, but this time State Secretary of State Tillerson also said no militarization, freedom of navigation that we've been hearing for the past 8 or 10 years. How do you think the ASEAN countries will react to the U.S. Remarks on the issue?
Well, actually, you know, the situation in South China Sea is not much better than a year ago. You know, since last June, since the new president of the Philippines, Mr. Duterte, took office, and he changed his predecessor's policy to rely on the United States too much, and he made a kind of a rebalance between the U.S. and China, and he said, you know, we need China's economic assistance, and we cannot compete with China in South China Sea, and the South China Sea issue cannot be solved by military means, etc. So since then, I think the bilateral relationship between China and the Philippines has been improved a lot, and also the tension in South China Sea has been lowered very much, and China and ASEAN countries are now negotiating about COC, Code of Conduct, and probably towards the middle of this year we will have a framework there, and towards the end of the year we will have a Code of Conduct. Yeah, so this is all the very, I think, very good and very positive developments in South China Sea. And China also expressed the opinion several times that those countries who are not regional participants, who are not ASEAN countries, they should have very positive.
So do you think there's a consensus right now that China and ASEAN countries should cooling down the situation on the South China Sea and seek a common development and other opportunities?
Exactly,
together?
There's a consensus right now, and especially at the recent ASEAN summit Duterte did not mention about so-called reclamation and land reclamation and militarization of South China Sea, and he did not, of course, did not mention China, etc. And yes, some people mentioned that, but in general, I think there's a consensus about that. So I think we have a very positive development towards the diplomatic consultation of the South China Sea issue, and other countries, including US and Japan, they should play a positive role rather than disturbing the
responding to the
yes.
reality. Thank you very much, gentlemen. We'll continue this after a short break. You're watching Dialogue on CGTN. Stay with us. You're watching Dialogue, and we're talking about this US-ASEAN foreign ministers meeting took place on Thursday in Washington, D.C. As this year's ASEAN chair, the Philippines dropped references to land reclamation and militarization from their chairman's statement. And Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte has taken positive steps to enhance the Philippines' relationship with China, such as visiting Chinese warships and holding telephone conversations with Chinese President Xi Jinping. And for more on that, let's cross live to Manila for Mr. Richard J. Haidarian, an international current affairs expert. Richard, how do you see the attitude change from the Philippines toward China, especially on this very thorny issue?
Well, I mean, if you look at the statement that came out of ASEAN, President Duterte really made sure that nothing critical of China, whether directly or indirectly, is said. So the words serious concern or grave concern, we didn't see that. The words reclamation and militarization, which Vietnam pushed forward for, and as far as I know, even Brunei and Malaysia wanted it there. Duterte vetoed that because he's the chairman of the ASEAN, and there was absolutely no reference or even raising the issue of the Philippine arbitration case against China. So that was a huge concession that Duterte made. And I think what Duterte had in mind is his meeting with President Xi Jinping in coming week on their sidelines of One Road and One Belt Summit. And I think what he wanted to do is to tell China, I'm doing my part to make sure that we keep the relationship between ASEAN and China and Philippines and China on a good footing. And I hope that that will translate into better economic and investment relations between the two countries, and also eventually some sort of a modus vivendi in the South China Sea, because the Philippines is also moving ahead with improving its facilities in the Spratly or Nansha chain of islands, and it hopes that China will not disrupt those plans, as the Philippines is also willing to turn a blind eye, or at least as far as ASEAN statement is concerned, to China's reclamation activities in the area. So a quid pro quo is what I see here between Duterte and China.
Richard, I'm glad that you mentioned President Duterte's upcoming attendance to the Belt and Road Forum in Beijing. What can we expect from this attendance?
Well, I mean, first of all, you're going to see a reiteration of the fact that what President Duterte said last October in Beijing, that he wants better relationship with China, that he doesn't want one issue, particularly the South China Sea, shaping the entire relationship, defining the entire relationship, the fact that he wants to have healthy distance from America and pursue an independent foreign policy. He wants to show to China that all of those promises are still true. We know that Duterte is known for contradicting himself a lot. He's been called the Trump of the East. But as far as his China policy is concerned, he's actually quite consistent, and he wants to send a very clear message to China. It's also expected that he, together with Chinese officials, are going to talk about specific investment projects that China has in mind in the Philippines, including a major railway project in the island of Mindanao, where Duterte comes from. So some specific agreements could come out of there. And recently, just a few days after the ASEAN summit, Duterte was aboard three Chinese warships, a frigate and a missile-guided destroyer, which actually visited the port of Davao, his hometown. And aboard the ship, first of all, he said he might be too busy to meet Trump, which was a very interesting statement. And then the other thing that he suggested is joint naval exercises between the two countries. And based on my discussion with senior officials in the Philippine government, it seems that the two countries might consider a memorandum of agreement or a visiting forces of agreement in order to allow for more advanced military cooperation. And this is a huge sea change, because at this point last year, the Philippines was the #1 enemy of China in Southeast Asia. Now it's a totally different picture.
Thank you very much, Mr. Richard J. Haidarian in Manila. So, gentlemen, Richard just mentioned a very interesting remark from President Duterte. He's too busy to meet U.S. President Donald Trump. And we know that actually the Philippines is the rotating president of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations this year. How would that lead to the whole operation and diplomatic direction of ASEAN?
Well, certainly it is very important for the chairman country to take the orientation of the development of the ASEAN. And just recently, President Xi Jinping talked to President Duterte, and who consulted about various issues, including invitation to Duterte to the One Belt and One Road summit in Beijing later this month. And actually several leaders, Aung San Suu Kyi and others also will come to Beijing to attend that summit. So actually all the ASEAN countries will participate in that initiative. Yeah. So by launching that initiative, China will enhance its relationship with ASEAN countries very much. Of course, this is first of all economic initiative, but economic initiative also has.
We're talking about economic initiative. We know that ASEAN also has this very ambitious plan of building an ASEAN economic community by the year 2025. So with only 8 years left, what do you think are the most urgent tasks at hand, Mr. Wu?
Yes, ASEAN has made the blueprint of 2025. And it has a very big picture of building the infrastructure, and which is was a key match China's One Belt One Road initiatives, and China has capitals and technology, especially China has the experiences. So China can help, the ASEAN members, ASEAN countries to build the infrastructure.
Actually, I know, many are saying that lack of technology and lack of capital are the major factors that's hampering ASEAN's future development. You just came back from some big cities in Southeast Asia. What's the link between China's Belt and Road Initiative and ASEAN's ambition?
Well, you hit the nail on the head. It's China's offering. They have infrastructure monies, and this is exactly what they need. I mean, Singapore, which is the new incoming head of ASEAN and will be hosting the presidency, have said they're getting down to very specific details. They want to enhance trade relationships, especially between ASEAN neighbors. It's not so much the tariffs, it's just trade terms down so that things can be done. And a lot of that has to be done with technology. So China is in a position to help both on the technology and much more importantly, if you go to these cities in Southeast Asia, it's all about investment. They're crying out for it. There's a cash crunch. They're growing at 5.2 or estimated to grow at 5.2%. ASEAN as a whole next year with the +3. But it's very, very precarious because no one knows exactly what Trump is going to do if there's going to be a trade war. So this is what this counterpoint between what China is offering and what the U.S. is offering. Very, very different styles and substance.
But what can the United States offering? Because
they can't.
Right.
Well, no.
What happened to,
he said, look, I want you to pay me money. There's no way he can politically come across and say, look, I want to have a big aid effort. He just vetoed everything there was about, overseas aid. I mean, to the point where the military people are saying, you can't do that. You're going to lead us into wars.
But what happened to the ADB, Asian Development Bank? Because it's led by the United States and Japan. Is their operations shrinking, or they just cannot afford so much capital this time?
They don't have the vision. I mean, there was an opportunity then a while back to allow China come in, and it was very willing to come in on a much larger basis and to put more capital in. The Asian Development Bank is fine as far as it goes, but it's a drop in the bucket. The needs of trillions of dollars of needs, and you're talking about a few.
So do you think China initiated AIIB? It comes at the right time.
It's not just AIB; it's the whole structure. Unless you start putting together this trade cloud okay, this new idea of a Belt and Road that stretches around the world and could in itself become the basis for something very similar to WTO between members who are participating. This is one of the few economic initiatives that brings together the most traditional enemies there are. Israel, Palestine, all right, Saudi Arabia, Iran, they're all members. This tells you something that how China is approaching this, the non-ideological component, is much important. This idea of gathering consensus rather than trying to rule it on a corporate level. It's, I have 51%, I can beat you. So this kind of idea, I think, is the future, and it's really something that is drawing ASEAN away from the U.S. Because it's not offering it.
And that leads to a curious question, Mr. Tao. Is ASEAN tilting toward China?
Oh, well, at present, I think yes. Yeah, because in the United States, one president has one policy, and Obama's policy and Trump's policy can be very different. Yeah, and Donald Trump is asking money from everybody. He asking NATO to increase the defense budget. He asks Japan, asks South Korea to pay more money to defense. So he's asking money from everybody. And China is investing money to the outside to help infrastructure building. And as I very much agree with the One Belt and One Road is China's version of globalization. You know, China just want to further push the globalization, and then China concretely launch that initiative. We will consult together, and we will build together, and we will be benefited together. So this, I think, is really a very, very wonderful project.
So, Ina, do you think the art of balancing for ASEAN between the United States and China, having said that earlier, will get easier in the future?
No, I think you can look, if you look at what Trump has done, he seeks controversy. He creates and lights a fire under something, then yells fire, and then says, listen, now we need to talk about some other things as well. He's trying to create, in his mind, leverage. This is what you do in the real estate game. And unfortunately, this is going to continue to be a pattern. I mean, even if he brings down the North Korean regime, it doesn't end the problem. All right, this is going to be a continuing fire that will smolder unless he's serious about getting down to the negotiating table.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your input. And that's it for this edition of Dialogue on CGTN. I'm Pan Deng in Beijing. Bye-bye.